Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading the last half of chapter 6, and I'm beginning at the bottom of page 45, although I read 45 the last time, but it helps as an introduction to the rest of it. Since Dad thought eating was a form of unavoidable delay, he utilized the dinner hour as an instruction period. His primary rule was no one could talk unless the subject was of general interest. Top of 46. Dad was the one who decided what subjects were of general interest. Since he was convinced that everything he uttered was interesting, the rest of the family had trouble getting a word in edgewise. Honestly, we have the stupidest boy in our history class, Anne would begin. Is he cute? Ernestine asked. Not of general interest, Dad roared. I'm interested, Mart said. But Dad announced, and bored stiff. Now, if Anne had seen a two-headed boy in history class, that would have been of general interest. Usually at the start of a meal, while Mom served up the plates at one end of the table, Dad served up the day's topic of conversation at the other end. I met an engineer today who had just returned from India, he said. What do you think he told me? He believes India has fewer industries for its size than has any other country in the world. We knew then that for the duration of that particular meal, even the dullest facts about India would be deemed of exceptional general interest, whereas neighboring Siam, Persia, China, and Mongolia would, for some reason, be considered of slight general interest. And events that had transpired in Montclair, New Jersey, would be deemed of no interest whatsoever. Once India had been selected as the destination, Dad would head toward it as relentlessly as if Garcia were waiting there and we had the message. Sometimes the topic of conversation was a motion study project, such as clearing off the dishes from the table. Motion study was always of general interest. Is it better to stack the dishes on the table so that you can carry out a big pile? Or is it better to take a few of them into the butler's pantry where you can rinse them while you stack? After dinner, we'll divide the table into two parts and try one method on one part and the other method on the other. I'll time you. Also of exceptional general interest was a series of tricks whereby Dad could multiply large numbers in his head without using pencil and paper. The explanation of how the tricks are worked is too complicated to explain in detail here, and two fairly elementary examples should suffice. To multiply 46 times 46, you figure how much greater 46 is than 25. The answer is 21. Then you figure how much less 46 is than 50. The answer is 4. You can square the 4 and get 16. You put the 21 and the 16 together, and the answer is 2116. To multiply 44 times 44, you figure how much greater 44 is than 25. The answer is 19. Then you figure how much less 44 is from 50. The answer is 6. You square 6 and get 36. You put the 19 and the 36 together, and the answer is 1936. It would be interesting to try that and see how accurate that is. I want to teach all of you how to multiply two-digit numbers in your head, Dad announced at dinner. Not of general interest, said Anne. Now, if you had suggested that we learn to multiply a two-digit number by a two-headed calf, Ernestine suggested. Those who do not think it is of general interest may leave the table and go to their rooms, Dad said coldly, and I understand there's apple pie for dessert. Nobody left. Since everyone now appears to be interested, said Dad, I will explain how it's done. It was a complicated thing for children to understand, and it involved memorizing the squares of all the numbers up to 25. But Dad took it slowly and within a couple of months, the older children had learned all the tricks involved. While Mother carved and served the plates, Dad sometimes carved wood for a hobby, but he never touched a carving knife at the table. Dad would shout out problems and mental arithmetic for us. 19 times 17. 323. Good, Bill. 52 times 52. 2704. Right, good girl, Martha. Dan was 5 when this was going on, and Jack was 3. One night at supper, Dad was firing questions at Dan on the square of numbers up to 25. This involves straight memory and no mental arithmetic. 15 times 15, said Dad. 225, said Dan. 16 times 16, said Dad. Jack, sitting in his high chair next to Mom, gave the answer, 256. At first, Dad was irritated because he thought one of the older children was butting in. I'm asking Dan, and you older children stop showing off. Then he registered a double take. What did you say, Jackie boy? Dad cooed. 256. Dad drew a nickel out of his pocket, grew very serious. Have you been memorizing the squares as I asked the questions to the older children, Jackie? Jack didn't know whether that was good or bad, but he nodded. If you can tell me what 17 times 17 is, Jackie boy, this nickel is yours. Sure, Daddy, said Jack. 289. Dad passed him the nickel, turned beaming to Mother. Lily, he said, we better keep that boy too. Martha at 11 became the fastest in the family at mental mathematics. Still feeling frustrated because she hadn't been able to take Ernestine to the speed typing contest, Dad insisted on taking Martha to an adding machine exhibition in New York. No, Lily, he told Mother, this one is not high-strung. I was willing to compromise on motion pictures of the typing, but you can't take movies of this. She goes to New York with me. Martha stood up on a platform at the adding machine show and answered the problems quicker than the calculators could operate. Dad, of course, stood alongside her. After the final applause, he told the assemblage modestly, there's really nothing to it. I've got a boy named Jack at home who's almost as good as she is. I would have brought him here with me, but Mrs. Gilbreth says he's still too young, maybe next year when he's 4. By this time, all of us had begun to suspect that Dad had his points as a teacher and that he knew what he was talking about. There was one time, though, when he failed. Tomorrow, he told us at dinner, I'm going to make a cement bird bath. All those who want to watch me should come home right after school and we'll make it in the late afternoon. Dad had long since given up general contracting to devote all of his time to scientific management and motion study, but we knew he had been an expert bricklayer and had written a book on reinforced concrete. The next morning he built a mold, mixed his concrete confidently, and poured his bird bath. We'll let it set for a while and then take the mold off, he said. Dad had to go out of town for a few weeks. When he returned, he changed into old clothes, whistled assembly, and led us out into the yard. I've had this bird bath on my mind all the time I was away, he said. It should be good and hard now. Will the birds come and take a bath in it, Daddy? Fred asked. I would say, Freddie, that birds will come for miles to take a bath in it. Indeed, on Saturday nights, I would say the birds will be standing in line to use our lovely bathtub. He leaned over the mold. Stand back, everyone, he said. We will now unveil the masterpiece. Get your towels ready for the little birdies. It's almost bathing time. We stood hushed and waiting. But as he lifted the bird bath out of the mold, there was an unbelievable grating sound, and a pile of dust and rubble lay at our feet. Dad stood deflated and silent. He took it so seriously that we felt sorry for him. Oh, never mind, Daddy, Lil said. We know you tried anyway. Bill, Dad said sternly, did you? Did I what, Daddy? Did you touch my bird bath? No, Daddy, honest. Dad reached down and picked up some of the concrete. It crumbled into dust between his fingers. Too much sand, he muttered, and then to Bill, no, it's my fault. Too much sand. I know you didn't touch it, and I'm sorry I implied that you did. But you couldn't keep Dad down for long. Well, he said, that didn't work out so very well, but I built some of the finest and tallest buildings in the world, and some bridges and roads and canals that stretch for miles and miles. Is a bird bath harder to build than a tall building, Daddy? Asked Dan. Dad, deflated all over again, kicked the rubble with his toe and started toward the house. Too much sand, he muttered. Well, that was pretty good. The next chapter I'm not going to read, I'll save that for the next time, but it's called Skipping Through School. And I want you to try and think of what they mean by that. Do they mean skipping through school like you kind of were running? Or do they mean skipping through school like you skip grades because the kids are so smart? Which do you think it is? Well, we'll find out the next time. Bye-bye.